Welcome back, fellow Smallville fans. I know it's been a while, but don't worry. I won't make y'all wait this long again. It's spring 2021, and let's face it, we all still could benefit from some positivity in this world. So why not talk about the ideal of hope himself in my review/discussion for Smallville Season 7. The story of Clark Kent continues, with all the spoilers along the way, of course. This season, Clark learns more about himself as a human, Kryptonian, and his destiny as a whole than ever before. He faces off against not only Lex, Bizarro, Brainiac, and the other enhanced individuals, but his biggest foe this season is his inner demons. And to make it more complicated, Clark meets his Kryptonian cousin, Cara. I'm gonna be flip-flopping in between both of those. Lana returns after her so-called death, and her and Clark finally try to make it work again after divorcing Lex. But it seems like Clark isn't the only one known for keeping secrets now. Lex learns about a secret organization his father was a part of years back called Veritas, which is actually my favorite arc of the season. And we see Lex stopping at nothing to uncover the truth about their prophecies and research. Lionel survives the aftermath of Reeves' Dam, and we see him doing everything he possibly can to protect Clark, aka the Traveler, in this season. After dying yet again in Season 6's finale, Chloe's dealing with a lot this season, mastering her newfound ability, her and Jimmy Olsen trying to make it work again, and years of her hacking and snooping around finally come to bite her in the ass. Lastly, Lois Lane is given a job at the Daily Planet, and in doing so, we get to see the reporter we know and love from the comics and other mediums come into her own this season. Regardless of this being the shortest season in the Smallville series, coming in at 20 episodes, it's probably the most story-driven one we've been given so far. Episode 1, we see Clark finishing the fight against Bizarro. After Reeves' Dam was destroyed, the water almost wipes out a young boy and his dad, but we see Clark use his heat vision like never before. He uses it to evaporate an entire body of water, and in doing so, saves the lives of a father and son. Clark does like a signature smile nod and just speeds off, and you just see the kid go like, whoa. I feel like that's such a classic moment. It definitely reminds me of something you would have seen in a Christopher Reeves movie. And I know what some of you guys are probably thinking. Clark revealed his superpowers to another person. What gives? Well, first of all, okay, it's a child. No one is going to believe a little kid running around saying he was saved by some sort of superhero that ran off at the speed of light. Come on now. The opening credits start now, and for the first time ever, Annette O'Toole is missing from the opening credits. I mean, it makes sense. She's not even in this season. She doesn't even cameo. Mentioned once or twice, I believe, but that's about it. However, the opening titles do make Aaron Ashmore and Laura Vandervoort regulars now. But speaking of the opening credits, though, could you imagine, say you didn't check any type of Smallville news back in the day, no Krypton site or anything. So you have no clue who this girl is in the opening credits, but at the end, she's in red and blue and she flies away. Well, I guess it's pretty obvious who she is. Of course, we get introduced to this mystery woman in white this episode and she saves Lex, but after that, we see Lionel Luthor being carried away by a mysterious figure. There's a lot going on at Reeves' Dam at the beginning of this episode. Clark and Lois drag Chloe's body out of the wreckage, and her death, was I fazed by it? No, not really. It's not the first time she's really died in this series, so you knew she was coming back. We learned more about the power of the sun's radiation, how it heals Clark, yet it hurts Bizarro, and if that isn't a twist enough, Meteor Rock heals this rogue phantom. That's going to make for an interesting villain. After being rescued by the mystery girl, Lex feels that he's gotten a second chance in life, so to speak. So, believe it or not, he turns himself into the authorities. But that doesn't really last long once he joins forces with Bizarro. Seeing Phantom Clark and Lex work together really makes me wonder what Clark and Lex would be like in an alternate universe where Clark was bad. I'd love to see that dynamic, and hey, if Marvel can have a What If series, DC should do it up too. Clark does admit he feels evil though this season. The way Lana is now is all because of Lex. And Clark thinks Lex is so spiteful because these guys always lied to each other and ended their friendship. It's a crazy chain of events and it's eating him up inside. Seeing the emotional weight Clark carries with him this season. God damn. I mean, imagine dealing with everything Clark's been through thus far. I probably would have blamed myself for everything too. As the story progresses, we find out that the spaceship that crashed actually belongs to a Kryptonian girl, and she's looking for a baby, Kal-El. Obviously, Clark is all grown up, so we find out that this girl that Chloe deems Supergirl has been in suspended animation for years until the incident at Reeves' Dam forced her awakening. But since she's been asleep for so long on Earth, she has no clue that Krypton was even destroyed. This poor girl essentially has no one now but Clark. So even though he was thinking of leaving the farm earlier in the season, he's staying now for Cara's sake. And he begins to train her, which I loved. Clark showing Cara the ropes definitely gave me season 1 and 2 vibes with Clark and Jonathan Kent training. But he's not just trying to help her with her abilities. He's trying to do what Jonathan did also, try to help her conceal her identity and protect herself. And most importantly, to fit in. But right away, Cara's just like, well, hey, fit in? You were the freaking captain of the football team. How do you fit in with that? I'm like, yeah, she's got a point. So she's been under the impression Clark's been on Earth living the American dream. What does she do? Well, she goes out and uses her abilities in public, so that brings suspicion and heat from Lex and the US government. So many things happen in the first few episodes of this season. We get introduced to the new editor at the Daily Planet, Grant Gabriel, another double letter name in the Superman universe. He gives Lois Lane a shot to make her mark in the newspaper industry. Moving on, the whole Lana Lang dying thing, well, she actually stole a clone that Lex Luthor made to fake her own death. So Lana framed Lex, and we catch up with her a little bit later, and she's in China. Got a new look and everything. I love this arc for Lana. I wasn't too into the character, but seeing her just new identity, new everything, this could work. It's a fresh new story. It doesn't last, because Lex finds her like the second episode in. I was so let down by this. I mean, Lana's arc in this season, the potential it could have had, was completely trashed. And for what? A subpar arc about taking down Lex and helping out the people whose lives he's ruined. Don't get me wrong, it's not the worst arc we've seen for Lana Lang this series, but if I'm gonna be honest with you, Lana was just a love interest to Clark in this show, and that's it. Anything more always came off hokey or forced. The writers should just please stop trying to make Lana Lang out to be something more. I do love Kristen Kruk as an actress, that's obvious, and I've talked about this before, but her character should have been written out season 4 or 5 at the latest. Of course, bring her back for some well-placed cameos, but why is she still a season regular? Anyways, we finally meet someone who has just as much pull as Lex Luthor and the rest of the billionaires in this show. His name is Agent Carter. No, not that Agent Carter. This one is the head of the Department of Domestic Security. Finally, the government catches on to all this Kryptonian shit happening, right? Carter and his crew get a hold of Kara's ship and they begin experimenting on it. And the person it belongs to, of course. My favorite line this season has to be in episode 6, Lara. When Agent Carter and Lex Luthor are arguing in the mansion, and Lex is just like, you better have official authorization to make an arrest. You're being recorded. And Carter's just like, I disabled the feed. And Lex is just like, my guards will be here any second. And Carter's just like, I disabled them too. Dude is a savage, and I don't know why. I just thought it was so funny. Just lost my shit. Speaking of Lex, I guess he has a soft spot for Lana still, because he decides to clear all of her charges when she comes back to Smallville. Lana's real reason for coming back to Smallville, though, of course, Clark. So she's back in town, and Clark thinks he's living the American dream. He thinks he has a shot again. Before we talk about their relationship more, I just wanted to point out, Cara straight up denies any recollection of saving Lex Luthor. It's kind of funny. It really harkens back to Clark and Lex's relationship in season 1. Clark and Lana are finally together, and it works now. Why? Well, Clark finally told Lana his secret. Finally, right? But it's not all it's cracked up to be. We find out that Lana is hiding a secret too behind her hush-hush ISIS foundation. And the fact that she kidnapped Lionel Luthor to get revenge on Lex, she's become more ballsy this season. I'll give her that. Now, introducing a new character. We gotta talk about Curtis Knox this season. This man is doing experiments in the show on meteor freaks, including Sasha Woodman. That's right, the B-girl from freaking season 1. But her arc doesn't last too long because Curtis Knox's, so to speak, healing of people with abilities is actually just a front to harvest their organs and cure his wife. And later, we learn about his unique origin story, that he's lived for thousands of years already. He's gone by multiple names, like Jack the Ripper, but we all know, even though it's not explained in the show, this man is the one and only Vandal Savage. That's right, and funny enough, in the show Legends of Tomorrow, one of the episodes, Vandal Savage uses the alias Curtis Knox at one point. Next up, we shift our focus to Chloe and Jimmy. They have their problems, they go out for a bit, they break up for a bit. Jimmy starts hanging out with Cara. I do like that though, because sometimes you have to spend time with other people to realize what you've been missing. Chloe is going through a lot this season too. I mean, she's even willing to get a procedure done to remove her abilities permanently. Lana's snooping gets more involved. We find out she's been spying on Lex. And eventually all that escalates when she temporarily gets the same powers as Clark and uses them, not for evil so to speak, but she uses force to expose the truth. And it is not a good side of her. So it's obvious from here on out, her and Clark's relationship is gonna be pretty damn rocky. Cara, her plot arc is evolving too. We find out that her dad had a thing for Clark's mom years and years ago. Get this though, Cara's dad was so salty that he helped destroy Krypton. Someone really doesn't take rejection well. Lex and Lionel's relationship becomes almost non-existent. I mean, Lex even goes up to his dad and says, "Whose father are you, mine or Clark's?" It's pretty obvious Lionel's been caring about Clark for a few seasons now more than his own son. Life at the Daily Planet? Lois Lane has been getting frisky with her new editor, Grant Gabriel, who we find out is buddy-buddy with Lex Luthor. Makes sense because Grant Gabriel is actually a genetically created clone of Lex Luthor's dead brother, Julian. For people watching back in the day, I mean, they couldn't have seen that shit coming. As I've said previously, Clark blames all the bad shit that Lana's been doing on Lex and his manipulative ways. But that comes around full circle when Clark and Lex have a talk and Lex is like, "I wasn't the first person to teach her about betrayal." Oops. I mean, he's got a point. The aspect of Clark hiding his abilities literally affects everyone's lives in one way or another in Smallville. And because of that, the Clark and Lex drama this season is top notch. And I'm all about it. Last season was a little bit mind-numbing, but in this one they space it out enough where it works. So taking a break from the recap, once again, I want to talk about some of the more funny moments and little references I picked up on this season. I mean, from the start, Bizarro Clark grabbing Lois's ass, I mean, if you were evil and had nothing to lose, you'd go for it. Lois and Clark are investigating the crash of a spaceship in episode 2, and he keeps trying to push Lois away from reporting on stuff like this. You'd think by now, Lois would get suspicious of all Clark's discouraging comments, right? Speaking of the ladies of Smallville, sorry guys, I have to simp for a second, but the writers knew exactly what they were doing when they put Laura Vandervoort in a bikini. Jesus Christ. So I didn't think about this one until now, but in the show Smallville, Metropolis is in the state of Kansas, right? But in other iterations, like the DCEU, it's in different areas in the US, like Delaware. I always bring this line up, you guys know this by now. Lex previously is just like, "The days of you showing up to my mansion unannounced are over." But in this season, he talks to Clark and he's just like, "You know where to find me." Contradicting much? In episode 4, we see Lana sending emails in the Kent barn. Okay, here's the thing though. What Wi-Fi service do they have in Bumblefuck, Kansas in 2007 that reaches all the way out to the barn? John Jones says to Clark in this season he will outlive all of his loved ones. But I mean, I'm still confused about his aging process because I'm pretty sure when Kal-El came to Earth when he was a little kid, all the way up until now, his aging has been similar to any other human in this world. When Clark goes to the comic book shop in episode 5, they show action figures of Black Canary, Hourman, and a ton of other DC Comics characters. Episode 5 also sees the Warrior Angel live-action film crew shooting their movie at Kent Farm. My inner filmmaker loved this episode. Wonder Woman logos on the crew apparel, the gun at the end that was supposed to shoot blanks had a real bullet in it. Alright, Smallville, I see that Brandon Lee Crow reference. Episode 7, Clark and Lana get struck by lightning, and temporarily, Lana has Clark's powers. I mean, when there's some kryptonite around, anything's possible, right? Clark keeps his powers this time, though, because this scene and arc is actually reminiscent of Shawn Ashmore's character from season 1, Eric Summers. And what's one of the first things Lana does with her newfound abilities? She has rough sex with Clark that shakes all of Smallville for miles. One of the episodes, Lois says Lana has an Amazonian left hook. I mean, direct reference to Wonder Woman. Towards the middle of the show, Cara goes on vacation to Coast City, which of course is a reference to another DC character, Green Lantern. Okay, so another thing I wanted to point out with you guys. Clark has been fooling a lot of people in many different ways. How so? The main thing I realized is that Clark puts on his jacket to go outside. It's not even for warmth though. His cold and hot tolerance is ridiculously different to ours. He could realistically be wearing shorts in the wintertime and feel fine. But then I guess people would catch on. Clark has to wear weather appropriate clothes whether he feels it or not, just in case someone stops by randomly. Dude is a master at hiding and blending in. Grant Gabriel's phone number is shown briefly in the show, and it's a 913 area code. I looked it up, and sure enough, it is a Kansas area code. I mean, the attention to detail in this show is great. And just for shits and giggles, let's call that number.
Subscriber you have dialed is not in service. If you feel you've received this message in error, please hang up and try your call again later.
Well, he's dead. I guess that makes sense. Episode 13, when Clark is placing fence posts in the truck. I'm sorry, but you can really tell that shit is being held on by a wire. I just realized too, Lex hasn't really been getting with too many random chicks anymore. He just doesn't have the time. The show has matured along with him. Here's one that really got me mad. In episode 16, Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane are trapped in a freezer. They're about to freeze to death. But why don't they just break the window right there and open up the latch? For real? Later on in episode 18, Chloe says to Clark she's probably tripped every speed trap in Smallville to get to the farm as quick as she could. But if Clark wants Chloe to come over to the farm as quick as she possibly can, why couldn't Clark just run over, scoop her up, and run her back in like 10 seconds? Selfish much? Must not be that important. Another little thing I noticed, and this can't really be helped, but you hear Laura Vandervoort saying things like sorry and a boot, and her Canadian accent definitely slips up a few times in the show. Brainiac delivers the classic line, "You're not in Kansas anymore," to Clark. Later in the season, Lois makes a comment about Clark finally being old enough to drink, which makes sense because in season 1 he was 14, now he's 21. It's just funny to me because, let's be honest, Clark and Lois look like they're scratching 30 this season. Okay, back to the discussion. The second third of the season sees Clark having a family reunion of sorts. Through the power of manipulation and Cara's Kryptonian crystal, Clark brings back clones of his mother and Zor-El. And of course, Kal-El's uncle wants nothing more than to dominate Earth. We find out that Lara was on Earth years ago, and we do get some touching moments during this Kryptonian family reunion. Seeing interactions between Lara and all the other characters on Earth easily put a smile on my face. Either way, in order to destroy Zor-El, Clark will have to get rid of the last remaining remnant of his mother, too. So he destroys the Kryptonian crystal and the clones as well. On the flip side of things, Clark and Lana team up to take down Lex. Despite their rocky relationship, a hate for Lex trumps everything. Lex has been up to a lot of shit, too. More of his clones that he created are surfacing this season, and he buys the entire Daily Planet. And if the season ain't crazy enough, Brainiac and Bizarro return, and where's Clark? Nowhere to be found. He's frozen in the frickin' Fortress of Solitude, actually. Can I just say, one of the best parts of the season is Tom Welling playing Bizarro. Seeing him be cocky and doing whatever it takes to get shit done is super entertaining. Regardless, Clark's absence doesn't last too long because he's instructed by Lana Luthor to find the Kryptonian responsible for building Brainiac, Dax-Ur. We find out that Dax-Ur used blue kryptonite to suppress his abilities so he can live on Earth and have a normal family. Sounds familiar? Unbeknownst to Clark, though, Lana Luthor was actually Brainiac in disguise, so he comes in after Clark leaves and siphons all the information out of Dax-Ur he needs. Also worth noting that Clark feels a little uneasy after him and Lana defeated Bizarro. Why? It seems that Bizarro Clark developed feelings for Lana, and maybe they weren't all bullshit manipulation tactics? Seriously though, how would y'all feel if a copy of you was spending time with your girl? A little bit later, Grant Gabriel dies by the hands of one of Lex's henchmen. We get introduced to a new vigilante in Metropolis, the Black Canary, and she's been working for Lex Luthor. We also see the return of Oliver Queen, aka Green Arrow, and of course Lois Lane gets all hot and bothered around him right away. But this time around, it doesn't take her too long to find out that Oliver is the Green Arrow. And guess what? There's a little season 6 nod in this episode too. Lois is like, wait a minute, I kissed Green Arrow when you were with me in that alley standing by. This is why Smallville is the best. For the most part, their continuity and references over all 10 seasons rivals the MCU if you ask me. Lois and Clark have a heavy conversation about their individual relationships, but deep down, Lois knows she can't be with Oliver. Lois is just breaking down and crying to Clark, and she wipes the tears away and she's like, hey, why settle for hot, rich, and famous when I can hang out with you? And she smiled. It's just a cute little moment of foreshadowing for me. Oh, and also, the Black Canary gets recruited into Oliver Queen's hero group. Episode 12, Fracture. Pretty much the weirdest episode of this season. We discover Lois and Lex, weird that they're working together anyway, they find Cara after her disappearance and she has amnesia now? Shortly after this though, there's an altercation and Lex gets shot in the head. That's right, in the middle of the freaking head. And that puts him into a coma. But I'm sorry, you get shot in the head, there's like a 95% chance or more that you're going to die. So, in order to heal Lex, Clark does this weird Matrix-like mind procedure with him. That's just how good of a person Clark is, though, because at the end of the day, Lex is still a human being. We do find out a lot of important information in this episode, though. We find out that Lex has actually been visiting the missing Cara for the past few weeks before the events of this episode took place. We see memories inside Lex's head that we've never seen before. We find out he's been more abused than we ever knew. And while Clark is in Lex's mind, Lex actually forces Clark to watch him and Lana have sex. I wasn't expecting this level of savagery in Smallville. Later, when Clark meets child Lex in this world, it's pretty clear to me that the child represents a tiny little part of Lex that's still Clark's friend. And that shows some vulnerability. But long story short, Lex Luthor basically dies, Chloe heals him back and Clark gets out, and we see the repercussions for Chloe healing people is getting much worse. Now it's that time again to talk about my least favorite episode of the season, and that goes to episode 13, Hero. When the episode starts, we see a giant Stride Gum logo, and Cara and Jimmy are at a One Republic concert. You already have a feeling that this is going to be a gimmicky episode. We soon find out one of the roadies for One Republic is Pete Ross. That's right, a fan favorite from seasons 1 through 3. But the main reason why I don't like this episode too much, besides the obvious product placement, is how Pete gets his superpowers. Through means of kryptonite-infused Stride Gum, and he gets stretching powers. Seriously? Don't get me wrong, when we see Pete in the doorway of the Kent house again, it almost brought a tear to my eye. We get to see Clark and Pete play basketball like they used to in Catch Up, but right when Clark finds out Pete has powers, what do you think he does? Oh no, you're gonna get hurt, people are gonna experiment on you, blah blah blah. Even years later, Clark is trying to stop Pete from just enjoying himself. I mean, I get that Clark's being protective, and it's the right thing to do, but you do have to let people sink or swim on their own. Regardless, this is still an important episode, though. It touches on the topic of a meteor freak using his powers for good. Hell, even Jimmy Olsen tries to convince Clark about how people would react positively to a hero. But to not dwell on this episode too much, Pete does in fact get too ahead of himself and tries to kill Lex after being manipulated to do his dirty work. I mean, this is why Pete left this life behind, right? To get away from being in Clark's shadow and getting into trouble. Regardless how people feel about the episode, though, and I get it, you can't deny it's still nostalgic. I thought this was funny. At the end of the episode, Pete's talking to Chloe, and he's like, I'm not going to let another light year pass before I see you again. Well, survey said that was a lie. Also, towards the end of this episode, Lex is beginning to manipulate Cara to get dirt on Clark. At this point, Cara doesn't know what to think, but she ends up moving into the mansion with Lex. This isn't going to end well. Now, Hero isn't a terrible episode, and it's not nearly as bad as I remember, but it's still my least favorite. And moving on to the rest of the overall story, we find out that Lana Luthor has a secret alliance called Veritas, consisting of himself, the Teagues, Virgil Swan, the Queens, and Bridget Crosby. And all the secrets they kept in the past surface again when Virgil Swan's daughter comes poking around. Clark gets Virgil Swan's journal from his daughter, and seeing all these Kryptonian glyphs and symbols and stuff in the book really makes him feel the pressure of living up to this prophecy of the Traveler. Cara and Clark try to track Brainiac, but that doesn't work out too well because Lana ends up being infected. And in order to end all the madness, so to speak, Cara agrees to go elsewhere with Brainiac. Clark has lost everything this season, man. Lex has a lot happening with this character towards the end of the season. He finds out that it wasn't a coincidence him and his father were in Smallville that day, the meteor shower. It's pretty clear Lionel knew the Traveler was coming that day. Speaking of Lionel, Lex's hunger for power drives him to kill his own father. That's right, Lionel Luthor is dead. Clark, of course, assumes Lex did. I mean, that scene where Lex is walking away from the body and Clark never breaks eye contact with him, even through a crowd of reporters, scene's powerful, man. Regardless of how bad he is, though, Lex still seems slightly haunted by this decision. We do get an amazing scene with Clark and Lex arguing about their fathers. Lex said Jonathan and Lionel both felt that Clark was the type of son they could be proud of. And Clark is just like, he would have been proud of you too, if he tried. And Lex is yelling at Clark at this point, and Clark just says, Lex, you only care about power and control. Even though Lex doesn't see it that way. He's just like, this is Smallville, Clark. Meteor freaks, cryptic symbols, alien ships. Someone had to take control. I mean, I do get where he's coming from. But Lex's vile ass is definitely not the one we want in control. He even blames Clark for Jonathan Kent's death. That's what a decent amount of these new superhero shows seem to miss. Amazing character debates full of passion, where we can see each person's side of the story and really feel for them. Lastly, Lex confronts his inner child. You know, the one that Clark saw inside Lex's mind? And he banishes any ties to that side of him. Essentially, any memory of Lex's childhood, any shred of goodness really, he just lets go. Lex also explores the mysteries of Veritas further by looking for specific keys that are linked to a box that the old group was hiding in Zurich. Jimmy Olsen gets his own episode, so to speak, called Sleeper, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad episode or anything like that, it's just nothing too eventful happened. Jimmy spies on Chloe to see what she's up to, and we finally see that years of Chloe Sullivan hacking into government computers has its repercussions. But Lex swoops in and clears Chloe's government charges for Jimmy. That is not good. You know he's gonna blackmail him in the future or some shit. Clark later goes to the fortress to figure out where Cara is trapped with Brainiac. And just as we feared, Lex finds all the keys and he uses them to open the box in Zurich, and inside he finds a compass of sorts. I know there was a lot happening in the season, but I just wanted to point this out. Did anyone else feel weird when after Lana Luthor died in the show, we still see Jonathan Glover in the opening credits? I mean, I know they had Jonathan Kent, John Schneider still in the opening credits, but it's weird why they don't just edit it out. It's kind of like a slap in the face. I mean, even if they did come back for flashbacks, I don't know, it was just weird to me. Either way, right now, I want to talk to you guys about my favorite episode of this season, Apocalypse. At this point, Clark's been reading Virgil Swan's journal, and in doing so, finds a mysterious message inside. Get this, Brainiac used Cara to jump back in time somehow to the day when Krypton exploded. Clark gets a warning from Cara in said journal, and he knows what's going on. Brainiac is going back to Krypton to stop Kal-El from ever being born, so to speak, and coming to Earth. Now, this is the part of the episode that took me off guard. Clark, being the hero that he is going to do something about this, right? Wrong. Clark actually accepts his fate and says, this planet would be better off if I never existed. The emotional burden he carries from seeing the people he loves get hurt and even killed, I mean, I get it. He believes he's taking responsibility for all the lives he's ruined. Either way, Jor-El shows Kal-El a world where he did never exist. Starting off, Clark finds out that Jonathan Kent, his father on Earth, is still alive. And funny enough, this news came from the Clark Kent in this reality. That's right, if Kal-El never came to Earth, Jonathan and Martha would still have a son named Clark. He tracks down Chloe, she's happy, drama-free, engaged to be married, but she was never friends with Lana. That sucks, but for the most part, pretty successful woman. Jimmy Olsen, nothing changes much about him. Lana, well, she's married to a French guy and she has kids with him and lives in the City of Lights. Her husband's name is Pierre Rousseau, which roughly translates, funny enough, to Pete Ross in English. Not the same character, obviously, but a fun little nod. I also think it's funny that in this world, Lois hits on Clark like immediately when they meet. Cara Kent is a government agent named Linda Danvers, and Lex Luthor is president with his right-hand man, Milton Fine. That's right, even if Clark never came to Earth, Milton Fine, aka Brainiac, would still end up destroying it by convincing President Luthor to launch missiles. Like I said, crazy episode. Other differences in this reality? We get to see Clark Kent wearing his classic reporter outfit in disguise. We find out Lionel Luthor raised Cara when she crashed her ship near Reeves Dam. And he died protecting her secret too, just like Jonathan Kent did for Clark. Even though Clark convinces Cara to team up to confront Lex is prepared, dude. He's got kryptonite bullets in them guns. Either way, Clark eventually snaps out of that reality and is instructed by Jor-El to go to Krypton. But unfortunately, Clark won't have his powers there. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent of how they explain Kal-El's powers in Man of Steel. No sun equals no radiation. And no powers for our boy. So Clark hops back in time, goes up to Krypton, and meets up with Brainiac and Cara. There's a confrontation. Brainiac seems to be destroyed, for now. And Clark sends baby Kal-El to Earth. That's right. In the past, we find out that our boy sent himself to Earth. Kind of poetic if you ask me. Well, back down on Earth, we find out that Lana is still unwell, so something's up, but Clark doesn't want to go back in time again and meddle with it for personal gain. Also worth mentioning that Lex Luthor had his best doctors on the planet looking after Lana and researching what's going on. and they find her disease to be alien-like. So Lex knows there's way more going on than people are telling him. Okay, now for the final part of our discussion. We have the climax of the season. The heat Lex is catching from having this cryptograph compass thingy is getting real. I mean, Lex even gets attacked and has an inscription carved into his damn chest. There's multiple different people after this cryptograph, and honestly, I love this aspect. The whole plot this season feels like something out of National Treasure, and I'm here for it. When Clark goes to St. Christopher's Cathedral, who does he find there protecting the mystery of the Traveler? Jason Teague's dad himself, Edward. And dude is crazy too, because when he finds out Clark didn't stop Lex Luthor and kill him, he has Clark held hostage. We eventually have a showdown at the cathedral. Lex makes his way there, fights with Edward Teague, and eventually gets what he came for. Upon doing further research, Lex heads back to the mansion. Why? Because he finds out Lana Luthor brought the mansion from Scotland to Smallville stone by stone. So the final piece of the puzzle has been in the castle that Lex has lived in for most of his life. And what is it? Well, it's a map to a specific area in the Arctic. Yeah, you know what that is. It can't be good. The finale has Cara acting super aggressive. She even kills Edward Teague by throwing him out of a plane. So obviously her and Clark are gonna butt heads. But was it really Cara though? Meanwhile, that favor Lex held over Jimmy's head, well, he puts it to use once Lois starts sniffing around his Arctic investigation. He goes up to Jimmy and he's basically just like, get this girl off my back or else. Eventually though, we know Jimmy's a good guy, so he just breaks down in front of Lex. He's just like, I can't spy on my friends anymore. And later it's revealed that Cara was actually Brainiac for the past few episodes. He tries to absorb Chloe's DNA and information, and believe it or not, it leaves him drained. Of course this happens because something with Chloe's ability just doesn't agree with Brainiac. One gripe I did have with the finale though is like, I get it, Brainiac is drained and Lex Luthor is the main villain of this season and the series. I just wish the fight between Clark and Brainiac wasn't so damn short. And after this fight, we find out that this time around, Cara is the one stuck in the Phantom Zone. So since Brainiac is actually destroyed this time, Clark goes back to check on Lana. And she's gone. She made a full recovery, but weirdly enough, she left a video message for Clark. This moment here, guys, it's probably the saddest moment in Smallville history for me. Right up there with Jonathan Kent's death. In the message, Lana says she needs Clark, but the world needs him more. Weirdly enough, in the new CW show Superman and Lois Lane is like, the world will always need you, but your family needs you right now. Sort of a weird opposite line thing there. Either way, it's a lose-lose. No matter what universe you're on, Kal-El is either gonna hurt the world or the people he's closer with, his family. So anyways, Lana made the decision a little bit more easier. She doesn't want to hold him back, and after she says how much she'll always love Clark and the video message ends, he turns around to see Lois in the doorway, waiting to console a heartbroken Clark. This was the perfect way to wrap up Lana Lang's arc and set up the future romance between Lois and Clark. I mean, during this moment, I almost cried. Chloe recovers after Brainiac's attack, and Jimmy comes over to check up on her, and he feels in the moment he's about to propose. But since he broke this deal with Lex, his goons come in, snatch up Chloe, and yeah, never mess with a Luthor, am I right? Our biggest moment of the season is upon us. Clark finds out from Jimmy that Lex is in the Arctic. So of course, Clark knows what he's after. Our series villain, Lex Luthor, confronts Kal-El in the Fortress of Solitude. Now he knows 7 years of suspicions, 7 years of cover-ups, and conspiracies have all been because of Clark Kent. Lex has an amazing speech and even confesses to Clark that if he would have told the truth from the beginning, Lex would have helped Clark become a hero. We get to ponder what life in Smallville would have been like if Clark was just honest with his friend. Obviously their goals are different. So Lex takes the object he found inside the Luthor mansion and puts it into the construct of the Fortress of Solitude. It collapses the fortress with Clark and him inside. Boom. Roll end credits. It is one of the most powerful seasons in this entire series. But before I get into my final thoughts, you know it's that time. We're going to talk about some cameos. Roll call. Starting off, we got Kim Coates. He played Agent Carter. He was from Sons of Anarchy, Silent Hill. Adventures of Lois and Clark alum Dean Cain, Superman himself this season, plays Curtis Knox. Helen Slater, the original Supergirl from the 80s movie, comes back in this universe to play Lara, Clark's mom. Christina Milian, that's right, the musical artist, is in this season playing a character in the Warrior Angel film that's filming at the Kent Farm. Dax Urus, played by Mark McClure, he was the original Jimmy Olsen in those Christopher Reeve Superman movies. Speaking of Jimmy Olsen, Michael Cassidy, who plays Grant Gabriel this season, played the Daily Planet photographer in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Barely recognized him with the beard. It's pretty obvious from the moment you see him on screen. Sam Jones III comes back to reprise his role as Pete Ross. If you guys haven't seen my interview with Sam Jones III, it's pretty entertaining. I'll leave that at the end of the video. Aaron Douglas guest stars yet again. That's right, he played a different character entirely from season 1. Brett Deer guest stars as alternate universe Clark Kent, you know, the guy from School, the short-lived Goldberg spin-off series. Camille Mitchell returns to the role of Sheriff Adams this season. Fan favorite character of the show. Lastly, Sasha Woodman makes her return to Smallville, but this time around, she's portrayed by a different actress. Giovanna Huget, or Giovanna Huget. I'm definitely butchering that one. There's definitely a fair amount of other cameos in this season, and probably other seasons that I haven't mentioned, so definitely put your favorites in the comments below. What can I say about season 7 of Smallville? The orchestral music was so emotional and epic, and it's maturing with the series. Composer Mark Snow unfortunately left after season 6, so you know I gotta shout out the newcomer for season 7 and onward, Louis Fibre. Juggling 3 villains worked out for the most part, because at the end of the day, we know the overall series villain is Lex Luthor. I didn't really have too many gripes with this season, because Lana's arc, even though it wasn't my favorite, was still better than season 4 through 6's arcs. Clark becomes a bigger person, not just because of what he does as Kal-El, but how he channels his emotions and still tries to make believe that he has a normal life in Smallville. Whether he sees it or not. Looking forward, honestly, I don't remember too much about seasons 8 through 10. A few side episodes here or there, and the Absolute Justice event, of course. But we'll get to that in a little bit down the line. I'm curious to see how Chloe gets herself out of government custody. And I can't wait for Clark and Lois's relationship to blossom in future seasons. Lastly, I gotta admit, this season is at the top of the list for me. Mostly due to the fact that this is the last season with Smallville showrunners Alfred Gough and Miles Miller. Smallville, season 7, gets a 9 out of 10.